I'm gonna just laugh. Why am I laughing? Oh gosh.
Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to our
New Aeonic.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, continue.
hi everyone, and to our YouTuber Q&A, and I'm very happy to have some amazing special guests for me today. And what we're going to be doing is answering some of the questions that you have sent in through Instagram, but predominantly the live questions that we see on the stream right now. So what we're going to do is going to begin by having our guests introduce themselves, tell us a bit about what they study and their background. And yeah, let's begin. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Do we go in order of the screen?
Yes.
No,
please.
we can see. Okay, so that's me. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tolu, and I am a first-year medical student from Keble College. I'm from London, and I've got a YouTube channel that I've started up that basically just shows my journey into becoming a doctor, which is just Tolu Duckworth. So if you want to check it out, I'll leave it in the comments for you guys to take a look at it. But that's just a bit about me.
Hey guys, I'm Rosie and I'm a graduate. I did archaeology and anthropology and I went to St. Peter's College. I actually applied to Hartford, but St. Peter's was great. And I have a YouTube channel which is just Rosie Crawford and an Instagram which is just a little Roo. I've got that on the screen so you can see it, but yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Eve. I'm a second year just finished my second year doing German and Spanish at Lady Margaret Hall, LMH, and I'm about to go on my year abroad. I also have a YouTube channel where I sort of like vlog student life, and this year I'll be vlogging my year abroad. So yeah, it's just Eve Bennett, so pretty easy to find.
Yeah, Tilly, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, my screen's obviously slightly different. Hi, my name's Tilly and I went to Jesus College and I am the founder of That Oxford Girl, which is a platform providing a student perspective of the application process and life at Oxford University. So we have got a YouTube channel, but our website, thatoxfordgirl.com, is actually the thing that's full of content about what goes on at Oxford Uni and the application process, written by a team of 100 student ambassadors currently studying at the university. And it's at That Oxford Girl on Instagram.
Hi everyone, I'm Viola. I've just finished my 4th and final year studying classics at New College. I also have a YouTube channel called Viola Helen, and I'll be vlogging the next year of graduate life.
Brill. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by looking at some of the questions that we got on Instagram. And the first question that I'm going to kick off with is, how much time do you spend working per week or day at Oxford? Who wants to start with that question?
I can start with that question. I feel like this question is kind of always interesting to receive because I don't have a particular set amount of hours that I dedicate to work. It usually revolves around how much work I've been set previously. So if I've got, let's say, 2 essays due for like that week, then I will spend quite a lot of time dedicated to planning that essay and writing that essay up. And I think I just generally spend a lot of just my spare time writing up my notes because there's always a lot of things to cover when it comes to medicine, so I just like continuously updating my notes and like refreshing my knowledge to ensure that I've got it all stuck in my head because medicine requires a lot of memory work, so I just continuously work alongside that behind the scenes, I guess.
I feel like it's really hard to put like a number on it because mine varies so wildly. I have apart from when I'm like revising for exams where I have like a timetable, during like term there are days where quite frankly I'm too tired, hungover, etc. to do anything, so I'll do maybe like 10 minutes and that'll be me walking to the library and then being like no. And then there'll be other days when I've got an essay due that will be like 8-9 hours just because I've left everything to the last minute. But also you have to remember that uni life is more than just work, especially when not around exam time. You have talks to go to, you have classes and you're walking to and from places, you've got to eat lunch, you've got to see friends and stuff, and it's really hard to put a time on it because usually, unless you're super organized or you're revising for exams, I feel like you're kind of just fitting work around everything else that's going on in your life. So sometimes you'll be sat there for 20 minutes just because you've got 20 minutes free. It's very rare that I have like a big 5-hour block where I've not got any plans or things that I need to be doing, even just admin, like doing the washing and like, I don't know. Yeah, so it's really hard to say.
Anyone else want to give a shot at that question? Okay, bro. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is, How much do Oxford or Cambridge look at your GCSE grades and A-level predictions?
Happy to go with this one. I think that what is key with applying to Oxbridge is consistency across the board. So often they're looking for people who have worked hard throughout their whole academic career and have preferably done reasonably well at a broad range of subjects. But saying that, I think that it isn't as prescriptive as saying that you need to get a certain amount of A stars at GCSE. That seems to be this huge misconception. I remember at my school, going around the common room, that everyone was like, oh my God, if you didn't get more than 5 A stars, there's absolutely no point in applying to Oxford. And I've met lots of people who haven't got 5 A stars, lots of people who have got more than 5 A stars, and actually don't let that put you off applying. There are so many other factors that are taken into consideration. So your grades are important, but they're just one part of the whole process.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, especially because I get a lot of questions at open days and things like that about how many A stars did you get or things like that. But the important thing is that Oxford does contextualize when they're looking at your grades. So they will look at the school that you attend and see what the average attainment of GCSEs are there and then benchmark you against that. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you got 10 A stars and you went to a school where everyone gets 10 A stars, that that's a bad thing, because that is still that's a really good set of grades to get. But it's trying to make sure that if you went to a school where the average grade in a subject is C and you somehow got a B, that is showing that you really did do something special there. Yeah, does anyone else want to take a shot at that?
Just
Okay,
make
so
sure your personal statement is supercurriculars, so like you want it 80% academic, 20% supercurricular. And by supercurricular, you're thinking stuff that's going to back up your subject. So like for me doing archaeology, it was doing an archaeological dig, also museum work, because that will be seen at the same time as your GCSE grades, but will also show that one, you've applied your subjects to why you need to do that, to do those for your chosen subject at uni, and also what you've got kind of to bring to the table that's a bit extra.
I would also say that for certain subjects, they place a lot of emphasis on the aptitude test that you do. So I know for my course for classics, because I was doing ab initio Latin, at least at my college, they heavily emphasized the aptitude test, which I didn't know until I got there. But so yeah, it's definitely worth preparing for the aptitude test well and getting advice wherever you need to.
Brilliant. I think we've actually got quite a few questions about aptitude tests. So I think it might be worth actually going around and everyone talking about the test that they had to do and any advice they might have. So Tolu, do you want to begin with yourself?
Yeah, I don't want my voice to go. So with Oxford, for biomedical sciences as well as medicine, you're expected to take what is called the BMAT. The BMAT constitutes 3 sections. Section 1 focuses mainly on your logical and your aptitude skills. Section 2 focuses on your scientific knowledge, so it asks questions about biology, chemistry, maths, and physics. And then Section 3 tests you on your essay writing skills. So there's so many things that are sort of tested with the aptitude test. And I think the best way to sort of go about that test is to definitely practice as many questions as you can. There are quite a few sample papers available up on the BMAT website, and there are also some textbooks like the BMAT practice questions that you can access from Amazon, for example, just to get into the habit of practicing, because it's really, really key when it comes to this paper. And one thing that I'd suggest as well is to definitely invest in textbooks or try and get access to resources that have worked solutions, so that you can at least see why you got particular things wrong and how you can learn and develop and, you know, improve from that. But overall, that's the general gist of the BMAT. So just definitely practice as much as you can.
Brilliant. And Rosie?
I didn't do one. We had to submit 2 essays. They couldn't be written specifically for like this. They had to be example essays from 2 of your subjects marked, and we also had to submit an extra essay that was just for Arc and Anth. There is more information about that on the website, but we didn't actually have an exam.
Okay. Eve?
So we had what's called the MLAT, which is like the Modern Language Aptitude Test. And if you do languages from A-level standards, you have to do the ones in the languages that you were taking at uni. So I did mine in German and Spanish. If you were doing it ab initio, so from scratch, so that can be like Italian, I don't know which other languages you can do from scratch, German, I think, Russian, Portuguese. Then you have to do like a made up language test where they basically give you a made up language and you have to kind of like show that you're very good at picking up like the composite elements. I honestly wouldn't be able to give you much tips on how to revise for that, because a lot of people say that it's ridiculously hard.
I
but
did it.
the point is that it is ridiculously hard. So they're not expecting miracles. They're just expecting the mind of a linguist. In terms of the ones that you do post A-level, though, I just have to hammer home it is grammar, grammar, grammar. That is literally what it is. So I actually just like was rummaging in my drawer and I found the ones that I did. I did like every single practice paper because I was really convinced that like my entire application was riding on this MLAT. Turns out it wasn't, but so basically like I got my teachers to mark mine because there aren't mark schemes online. And you can see like I was slowly improving sort of as I was doing them. And it's basically like gap fills. So you just have to like choose the grammatically correct one. And then the second half is like translations. So you literally just have to translate sentences. I'll say this now. There are just certain sentences you're just going to have absolutely like no clue how to translate it. But what they're looking for is a basic sound grammatical knowledge so that your grammar is right. They're less worried about the vocab. They're looking for like creative solutions. If you don't know the word for something, work around it, do a phrase that describes what that thing is, do a noun that you think looks similar. I remember coming out of mine and thinking I'd absolutely botched the German one. And then my tutor actually said, no, like we were really impressed with when you didn't know a word, you just kind of like improvised, but your grammar was still correct. And that's kind of what matters. So do loads of the A-level grammar textbooks. Make sure you're just like really, really hot on your grammar. That for me has always been my strongest aspect. And that's why I ended up performing really well in the MLAT, because it's basically just a test of your grammar. But also at the same time, if you flop your MLAT because your grammar is not your strongest aspect, it doesn't matter because they look at it holistically. So people who are better at speaking, people who are really, really, really interested in certain aspects of literature and are really talented in that aspect, like you don't have to be perfect in every aspect of your language knowledge. So the MLAT is literally, it's important, but it's like a drop in a big pool of important things.
Billy?
Yeah, so I did the ELAT, and I think, again, there's not much you can do to specifically revise for it, but the biggest thing that I would say is just get used to seeing unfamiliar materials. So get online, download articles, journals, look at newspaper clippings, get books off your shelf and open them on a random page, and give yourself kind of 15, 20 minutes to just read them, analyze them, scribble all over them. And one of the biggest things I'd say is make sure you annotate. Those annotations can be so useful when you then get to the stage of writing the essay. And the ELAT's also all about comparing text. So get used to looking at one text and comparing it to another. I also made a tick list of things that might be useful to look for in the exam. So although I didn't know what would come up, things like form, structure, language, themes, keywords that I'd really want to analyze and zoom in on. And that really just jolted my mind. So whenever I looked at a passage, rather than just staring at it aimlessly, I had something to focus on and something to start pulling out from that passage. So yeah, practice looking at the unfamiliar. That'd be my top tip.
Viola?
So I took the ELAT, which is the Classics Language Aptitude Test, which is different from the CAT, which is the Classics Aptitude Test, because I was doing an ab initio language and I didn't do Latin or Greek A-level. So that is, as Eve says, it's you get tested on a made-up language, but it's a bit longer than I think the modern languages one, because ours had 3 sections, and the way I prepared for it was I went online and got as many past papers as I could. And I remember because there were only, I think, 2 on the Oxford website when I was applying, I then went onto the Modern Languages website and got their one, and then I went onto the Oriental Studies website and got their one as well, because they had similar tests where they were doing also the made up language section. So it's kind of, yeah, as Eve says, it's really hard to revise for or to prepare for it because it's literally a made up language that you have to translate. And you're also being tested on grammar from really obscure languages. Like I think we had Romanian and Ukrainian in mine, as well as a bit of English language grammar, which you wouldn't necessarily know because we're not really taught grammar. But yeah, the way I prepared for it was I did as many past papers as possible. And when I was applying, there were no mark schemes, so I didn't know if I was doing it right or wrong either. But my biggest tip would be and also I think everyone says there's a big time pressure because it is a made up language and it gets progressively harder in each of the sections. And you have to translate into this made up language as well from English. So that just complicates it. But I'll definitely say annotate the made up language and just spot patterns. So I would just go in, I'd read the text and I'd read the sentence and I'd just note down I'd try to figure out what the words were, because they give you sentences so you can figure it out, but the endings will change or something will be different depending on where the word is used and how it's used in the sentence. So just note it down, scribble it down as fast as you can and notice the patterns, and then you'll eventually be able to link them together and then understand what it's actually saying. And that's just how I did it. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. I loved it. I love the test.
Yeah, and so for myself, sitting the MAT, so that's the exam that you do for doing computer science or maths. I have very similar advice, and I think the most important thing is just practice, because the kind of questions that you're being asked are very different from the sort of A-level style questions. Yes, the content is more or less the same as an AS level, but the kind of questions are really out of the box. They require more thought as opposed to actually just sitting there and calculating something. So exactly as the other said, practice is like the only thing that I can really say that you really need to smash out. But the other piece of advice that I would say is try and do the past papers in chronological order, because and leave the most recent paper to about a week or two before the exam. Because what I did is I started with the most recent and worked my way backwards. And then by the time I got to like 2002, the paper didn't really look as similar to the one that it is now. And so I would start earlier, maybe like start a bit earlier, so like 2007, 2008, and then kind of work your way to the present and leave the most recent one to when you feel like you're a bit more prepared. Because when I started doing the papers, out of 100 marks, I was scoring like 24, 25. And then as I got more practice with them, I was moving to the 30s, 40s, 50s. And especially with the MAT, if you see yourself getting like 40 or a 50, that's actually a really good mark for the MAT. Like the average score on those amongst offer holders is like 55 or 50. So if you're getting about 50, don't compare it to your A-level papers where you might actually expect to get an 80 or a 90 if you're doing well. It really is nothing like that. So if you'll find them difficult, they're meant to be difficult, but just practice as much as you can. Okay, so we're going to move on to another question that kind of relates a bit to what we've seen in some of the live questions here. And that's going to move on to looking at interviews. Now, a lot of the interviews this year might actually be virtual. So do you guys have any advice for virtual interviews?
– Like that just sends like the fear, like, and I completely understand why a lot of people are panicked about it, because I mean, actually in a weird way, I suppose it is nicer because you're not having that dreaded thing where you walk into a tutor's office and you don't, like when I walked in there was 7 chairs and he was like, sit down, and I was like, where? And it was like that sort of thing, and you're not in like a really big daunting office. But I also get that it's sad because you kind of don't get the experience of like going to Oxford, meeting other people who are in the same boat as you, living there for a while. And so I think there are definitely pluses and minuses. I would say that you just really need to get comfortable with video calling and stuff. And if you don't have people to video call, I would really recommend just going to like webinars or like going to talks like these, just so you get used to the format. And I would also say I have a really bad habit of doing this. It's like you look at yourself when you're talking, but when you're doing this Zoom call, make sure they're on like a big screen so you can just see them and you're like tiny in the corner, and look at them and like try and maintain. I know you can't really maintain eye contact on a Zoom call, that's the problem, but just try your hardest to act as if you're in a room. Make sure you're shut off with no distractions or anything, and look at them, because then that will actually weirdly stop you from thinking as much that it's a video call. It's like a proper conversation. But other than that, yeah, I really feel bad for you guys, but you will smash it anyway, because we are humans and we're good at adapting to things. So
also, international students have been using Skype interviews for quite a long time now. So it's actually something that has been ongoing for people who haven't been able to come to Oxford for other reasons as well. And you're not going to be the first person to be doing it. And everybody is now going to be having that level playing field. So you're not at no disadvantage by having to do it over Zoom in any way. But make sure, yeah, your internet connection is stable. Don't add any extra stresses by things going wrong, and just try to, yeah, kind of get yourself seated in the zone as you would for a normal interview in regular times. So yeah, to really avoid any extra pressures.
Yeah, so regardless of whether or not an interview would be in person or online, the tutors are still just looking for people who are willing to think aloud and express their thoughts aloud, because that's essentially what they're testing you on. Because the aim of an interview is just to show tutors whether or not you'll be like the kind of person they'd be willing to want to tutor, because the Oxford system is heavily based on what's called the tutorial system, which is essentially just like a discussion about a particular topic within that degree with someone who's really high up in their field, for example. So they just honestly want to see you talking to them about how you potentially like get to an answer. So that whole element is still the same regardless of whether or not it's online or in person. So just to remember to continuously like say your thoughts aloud and say why you think this is an answer, why you don't think this is an answer. Just be free to express like your opinions, because that's what they're kind of testing you on.
Off the back of that, we've received a question that says, how do you defend your opinions in an interview situation? Does anyone have any advice for that? Because I definitely know that I experienced that in some of the philosophy interviews, in that I walked in with an idea, and whether or not the tutors agree with you, they're going to play the devil's advocate and try and give you an objection and see how you react. And I think the advice that I would have for this is not to be too, you kind of need to strike a balance between not being stubborn, but also not giving in like immediately without any thought, because you want to really try and understand their perspective and see where your idea might go wrong. And if you feel like that there is a way that you can fix it and still agree with your idea, then it's really good to vocalize that. But you really want to make sure you're not coming across as defensive about your initial idea. And if you do feel like the tutor's response actually makes way more sense, and it's very okay to be like, actually, I think you're right because of this reason. This is what makes sense, or this is what I might have overlooked earlier. But you also don't want to be like, oh, you're a tutor, you must be right, so I'm just going to agree with you. Yeah, does anyone have any advice on how to sort of tackle those situations?
I know for
Go, Rosie, sorry.
Sorry, Eve. I know for archaeology, for our interviews, obviously a lot of it is evidence-based because we're talking about a historic period, and they are separate. So you have separate interviews for archaeology and anthropology, which is good because it means you don't have to remember everything in one interview. But in terms of if they ask you something about an artifact, you might not have a clue what it is they're showing you. You might have a theory. I know I had several theories that were wrong. That's okay. They're not expecting to know everything because this, for one, is a new subject, and you're going there to study it. They don't want you to be a professional at it immediately. They just want you to try and find an endpoint and see how you get to that endpoint. And in terms of whether you've got an idea and you maybe think it's wrong, just try and think of something that you could use as evidence. So, for example, you could watch documentaries for archaeology, history anyway, and think about places you've maybe been that you could just drop in as possible reasons why you've thought that thing, just so they can see how you're thinking, because they just want to see your thought tracks, essentially. So just to come out with the evidence out loud is my way of doing it.
That was basically what I was going to say. I was just going to say, like, the entire Oxford teaching system, when you get here, you'll realise, especially for humanities, it's just teaching you to be able to argue a point and defend your point. That is literally what Oxford is, and is like, or every single one of my tutorials, even when at the end of term my report has been lovely, they'll tear your essay to shreds and they'll ask you, why have you written this? It's not that they necessarily disagree with you or that they don't think that your point is a good point. It's that they want to see how you got to that point, how you can defend that point. They don't want you to just make a point without having any reasoning behind it. And I would definitely say that when it comes to interviews, it is a lot less about the conclusions that you come to and more about how you come to those conclusions. I was like completely wrong, I think, about most of the things that I said in my interview, but I backed it up, as Rosie was saying, with things that I'd read somewhere, or just like, oh, well, like logic would dictate, or like according to like what I've seen in the past. And if they try and steer you in a different direction, don't like refuse to be steered in that direction. But as Manny said, like, don't be like super deferential. Don't just be like, oh, your opinion must be the right one, because they might actually be coming at you with a wrong opinion or like a wrong idea to see how well you can hold your own. That's what they did in mine. So they kept like undermining my argument, and I came out like sobbing. I managed to hold it together in there, but I like kept saying why I thought that something was the way that it was, and he just kept playing devil's advocate to the point where I was literally questioning my own intelligence. And that is kind of the whole Oxford teaching system, is trying to like get to the fundamentals of why you think the way you do. So the main thing I can say for an interview, and this works for every single subject, is just think out loud. Never ever think in your head. Just say what you are thinking. It might sound stupid, but they want to know how the cogs of your brain fit together. That's what they're looking for, because they need to see if you're teachable in an Oxford setting, and if you can basically have an opinion that you can adapt and change, but like also stick to your own opinion when you need to. So think out loud, basically. Yeah.
I really like that phrase, the cogs of your brain.
2 points. Yeah, that was good. To add to those 2 points, there's a phrase that I always post about on the Oxford Girl, which kind of as a summary phrase of what Rosie and Eve have just said, which is why justify. And if you have that in your head throughout the entire interview and every statement you make, rather than what I often refer to as empty statements, saying things like, I think Virginia Woolf was a feminist writer. Like, that doesn't tell anyone anything. But by saying, I think Virginia Woolf was a feminist writer because, and then justifying it in something you've read in her text or something you've read about her life, suddenly you're providing evidence to the opinion that you've given. So why justify when you're writing your personal statement, when you're at your interview, keep it in the back of your mind.
Brilliant. So that sounds really good. One of the questions that I've had on Instagram is, do you have to be absolutely perfect in an interview? What if I make a mistake? Now, have we got any stories here? Okay, I can already see everyone lighting up. Any stories here of any sort of things that you said in your interview that you immediately were like, oh my God, why should I say that?
Yeah.
Who wants to go?
So many.
Several. I made a whole video on this because there was so many. One that sticks out to me, in fact, two, because they're quick. The first one is that they put artifacts on the table and we have to try and guess what they are. I kind of touched on this before, but I was so confident about this one artifact because it looked like a pot, like a rim of a pot. And I was like, that's a Roman pot. And the guy just looked at me straight in the face and went, no, it isn't. And I just didn't know what to do. Completely froze, but he made it seem like that was that, but it really wasn't. Obviously, like, I got in and I've been through it, but sometimes they are a bit like that, because that's their thing. I think sometimes they forget that most people don't know everything about their favorite subject. Another one was I'd written about a very specific hominin, like ancient human relative, in my personal statement, and I'd quoted it from a book, and I had read this book, but I went into one of my interviews and there was like a skull on the side of, and I knew it was this hominin in my head. And the fact that I talked about it in my interview and in my personal statement meant the fact that I asked him straight out, what is that, made me feel like an idiot. Just because then I thought, oh, that undermines my whole personal statement now, because he's thinking I must have lied, but it's just nerves and they expect it. I'm not even sure he remembers me doing that. You play things up in your head so much.
I feel that on a spiritual level. I got caught for an absolute mug in my interview. I realized afterwards that he did it to everybody. When I went back to college and I spoke to people about it, I felt a bit better because I feel like he plays the same game with everyone. He's actually lovely. He's one of the nicest guys ever. But he just has like an interview tactic that can be quite unnerving. But he gave me a poem in German and he said, okay, so if there are any words that you don't know, just let me know. And me thinking, right, there are a lot of words that I don't know in this poem, so I'm not going to sit here and make him go through every single one because I'm just going to look stupid, right? So I asked for enough words that I'd be able to get the general gist of what was going on. And then he was like, right, now translate the poem out loud to me. And I obviously had just only asked for like 4 words, and then I had to like go through like an absolute idiot, asking him for more words. And I thought, you know what, at that point I was like, there's no way that I've got in. And then the whole interview was like really traumatic for me, I can't lie. It was like the worst time of my life. My other one was lovely, but that one was not a vibe. And it was just constantly him looking at me as if I just said the most stupid thing ever. And at the end he literally concluded with the question, is poetry death? And at that point I was just like, well, I've not got in. So I just threw caution to the wind and I gave him this really random answer. And then afterwards he told me that was like a really, really well thought out answer. And I think it's because I'd kind of given up by the end. But I thought I got everything in that interview wrong. And he said he was actually really impressed with it when we actually spoke about it later down the line. So as Rosie says, you definitely play it up in your head, and some tutors definitely come at it trying to sort of like, as I said, like play devil's advocate, and don't mistake devil's advocate for you being wrong all the time, if that makes sense. That was what I would say. But yeah, and also if you're doing a languages interview, ask for the vocab that you need, because I look like such an idiot.
Right, we're just gonna welcome V. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So we're currently talking about some of the sort of interview stories, things might not have gone well, just to reassure people that you don't have to have a perfect interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, does anyone want to go next with
Where are they? Where are the people?
the people are here, they're watching, they're
Where?
through the live stream.
Oh,
They
it's a
are
live stream.
Yeah.
Nice.
You are live right now.
I was like, I can only see us guys. I was like, sorry. Hi everyone. I'm so sorry I'm late. I've obviously missed it, so I don't know what the guys have been saying. But interviews are obviously scary things because you are scared and you're putting yourself out there, but they shouldn't be scary because it's just a moment for you to kind of show yourself the amazing person you are on paper, just to bring it to life, and no one is there to trip you up at all. That's not what they want. You have to remember that Oxford, Cambridge, wherever you're applying, but Oxford especially, they are lucky to have you. So it's essentially your time to shine and see if you're going to enjoy being there. Like, think of it like that, and I think it makes it a lot less scarier. And also remember that everyone is in the same boat, regardless of like what they look like, where they come from. Like, they're all going to be as nervous as you are, and you just gotta just be yourself, which is hard, easier said than done. I think everyone says that lightly, like, be yourself, you'll be fine. And it's like, but it's hard to be yourself because you're putting yourself out there. But just honestly, you've got this. The fact that you've got this far within itself speaks volumes. So yeah, like, interviews they are scary, but they shouldn't be, but they are.
I remember there was a point in one of my interviews where I said 4 times 4 was 12, and I just kind of not even thought about it and just moved on and started doing the rest of the maths. And then he was like, well, that isn't the right answer. And but he wasn't like condescending about it. They're just trying to point out, okay, you might have made this error. And at the time I was like, well, I've clearly not got in if I can't do a simple multiplication bit, but that doesn't really matter. Like, they understand you're nervous, they understand the pressure that you put on yourself for these situations. So yeah, it's definitely not about giving like a stellar performance. Like, obviously you want to try and show your best and be your best in that interview, but they understand that there are so many more factors that come into play in those situations.
I also think it's good to like say something, rather than if you literally have no idea what the answer is, you could just sit there and be silent, but that's also not going to get you in. I was asked what the meter in a poem was, and I had absolutely no idea how to work out meter. Had some vague names of meters in my head, but didn't know what this poem had. And I sat there in front of 4 senior tutors for English at Jesus and said, it goes kind of like, do dum, do dum, do dum, and felt like an absolute idiot. But I gave it a go. I had no idea what it was called, this meter that I'd sort of worked out, but I had worked it out. And although I didn't know whether it was tetrameter, pentameter, whatever the label was, they were like, yeah, that's it, what's it called? And of course I had no idea, but I kind of got there, and as you guys said earlier, I'd shown what I was thinking and tried, and yeah, have a dum moment, just go for it. I like that.
Yeah, so like the Oxford interviews are like, there's no expectation for you to get everything entirely correct. I know for my interviews as well, I was asked topics that I had like not covered at all within school, because like the way sciences within schools are taught is never in like a consistent order. So I remember for one of my interviews, I was asked about a genome, and I had no idea what a genome was because I had never covered it within school. So I was asked about a genome, and I told them that I'd never covered it before. But I think because of that, they knew that they didn't really expect me to like know all of the answers, but so they'd guide me in a way towards the correct answer. So I'd given my suggestions using knowledge I had in previous instances, and then go along from there. And I think that's what's really handy with the Oxford interviews, that they don't expect you to know everything, but they just want to know how you could potentially get to an answer using like the foundation of knowledge that you currently have, because they know that everyone will be in different boats with things that they've covered within school or outside of school. So there's no pressure to get everything perfect, because they don't assume that everyone will know everything up until the point of the interview. So I eventually got to the answer, even though I got to it while I felt like a really convoluted route, but I did eventually get to the answer that they were looking for. So that was really great for me, I guess.
Real. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next question, which has also come from the live stream as well, which says, how do I pick a college? I'm struggling to decide which college to apply to. So who wants to kick off that question?
Can you ask it again?
Sure. How do I pick a college if I don't know which college to apply to?
Well, I don't know if I wanted to get. Well, I think with Oxford, like everyone who ends up at the college they're at believes like their college is the best college, right? And I feel like that's a positive thing. It means that no matter where you eventually do end up, you're going to be happy there, because I think everything happens for a reason, you know. And if you have to choose, then obviously look at the things like, do you really, really want to cook, for example? And does that college have kitchens? Or what subject are you doing? Do you want to be with a certain tutor, or do you want to be in a place that's got a higher number of geographers? Or do some colleges even offer geography? You know, like there's those little things to consider that obviously make that difference. But overall, I would say that all the colleges are quite similar in that sense. But I guess that's the beauty of being able to go to Oxford, is that you get to also choose. Once you're at Oxford, you get to choose within that what college suits you best. And every college has a different thing. Like I love LMH because of how diverse it is in that sense, and how they champion so much change, and how they're just always at the forefront of that and what they stand for. So for me, if I had to go again, I'd choose because of that. But you might have a different preference. You want to be close to the city? Do you want to be further out? It genuinely depends on what matters most to you, and what is it's like choosing a place to live, really. That's what you're essentially choosing. You're at Oxford regardless, but now you're choosing where to live, I suppose. I don't know if anyone can agree with that. I feel like that was
I was gonna say, like, that's like at the end of the day, it's somewhere that you will spend like a lot of your time. But I know I'm very aware that like because of Corona, you might not be able to go and visit, because normally I would say go for the vibe, like you'll just know. But I know that you can't do that now. And I went on Unique, and I just happened to get put at LMH, and I just fell in love with it, and then I was just set, like I didn't have to think about it. But I was going to say, what I've recommended a lot of people to do during this time would be to do a spider diagram of what do you want out of uni experience. So think about all the things that V was just saying. How close do I want to be to the centre? I didn't want to be that close because I like a bit more peace and quiet. What sort of, like, I don't know, even like if this is something that bothers you, like state school to private school ratio, what sort of architecture, if that's something that's going to bother you, have a look at the accommodation. And then once you've got a list of everything that you want, then you've just got to get stuck in. You've got to do a bit of deep dive research, go on their social media pages, go on their websites, go on all the statistics if you want to, and have a look and see how all of the colleges align best with the things that you want out of college life. And even talk to students there, like find students there who'll be like student ambassadors on their page, drop them a message, ask them questions. I'm not saying it's the end of the world which college you pick, because it isn't at all, and you'll have a great time no matter where you go. But because you can't actually visit, I would say, yeah, do a spider map and really, really think about what you want out of university life, because different colleges prioritize different things. And if you're really still stuck, then all of the live streams and stuff that colleges have been doing because of like the virtual open days, I imagine will be up on their websites and things, so those might be good to watch. And worst comes to absolute worst, then watch like my vlogs, or like, not worst comes to worst, but like I know that they don't show like an accurate representation because they're kind of just part of vlogs, but I watch like study tubers vlogs to see what the campus looks like. Some of us have done dedicated tour videos, those might be quite useful to watch. Yeah, like I've done an LMH tour video, and so just have a look around, and at the end of the day, don't be too pressured, because as we've all said, like you'll end up loving wherever you go, so it's fine.
Exactly, because if you put a lot of pressure on it, if you get pulled or anything, you might be like, oh no, I didn't get into the college that I wanted, or whatever. Not even get in, you just didn't get assigned to the college that you might want, and then be like, oh no, that's it, I don't want it. No, trust me, you will. I guess all of us here, we're all at different colleges, and I'm sure we all love our colleges, right? So like, it really, honestly, it'll work out.
Yeah, as you said,
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as you said, V, as well, like you don't stress about this at the application process, because ultimately the likelihood is you might not end up where you applied anyway. Like so many people end up at a different college. So yeah, like go for it, submit your application, but almost get excited once you know where you're going.
Yeah. Like I had applied to Hartford, and I was so excited after being there for like 3 or 4 days, like, oh, Hartford's so perfect and quaint, and I'm so excited to go here. And then I got something called an open offer, which means your place at Oxford is confirmed if you get the grades, but the assignment of the college will all be done. And like once results are out for everyone, they know where they have places. And I ended up at University College, which is literally a 1-minute walk from Hertford. But for the first couple of days, I was a little bit upset because I had already painted this like fantasy of what Hertford was going to be
same.
like. And after 5 days of being at Univ, I forgot Hertford was even a college. So it's really important to remember that it's just not the part of the application process to stress about. The things to stress about are more like making sure you have the grades, making sure you're preparing for the entrance exam, preparing for the interview. Picking the college is just, you need to be selfish, see what you're interested in, see the things that are important to you and the values that are important to you, whether that's a gym, whether that's accommodation for all 4 years, proximity to town, etc., old, new, and then just kind of pick based on that. Out of a show of hands, how many of us actually ended up at different colleges to the ones that we applied to? Brill, okay.
It's like bad metaphor. I have to warn you now. I do this a lot. Like, for me to understand something, I have to like compare it to something else. It's kind of like being invited to like a dinner that you really want to go to, and you get there first, and they'll say like everything's the same on the plate, but just kind of choose where you want to sit. You're still at the dinner table, you're still going to eat the food. You just might want the window seat, or maybe you want that seat by the door, or maybe you want to be like, it's kind of like that in terms of you're still at Oxford, you're going to have Oxford experience. You just, you know, got to choose your seat, I guess. And even if you get a random seat, you still get the same food. So it's all chill. Do you know what I mean?
I think the main difference is some colleges are way richer than others. So like it doesn't really affect your experience, but it's something that I had no idea about. Like the only reason I applied to Hertford is because I was told by someone who clearly didn't really know what they were talking about. It was the place that I would fit in, and I wouldn't fit in elsewhere, which is completely rubbish. But I got allocated St. Peter's, which I'd never heard of, and absolutely loved it. But it didn't have a lot of money. It was fine, and they had enough money to like help you with hardship. Like they gave me £1,000 in 3rd year because I was really struggling financially, and that you don't have to pay that back or anything. Like that's great. But in terms of travel grants and book grants, different colleges can offer different things if that's something that you want anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, I second that. And also, yeah, don't get too hung up on one college in particular, but maybe if you are looking at colleges and how to choose one, it's also important to consider the academic side of it, because different colleges will sometimes offer slightly different things academically. So with classics, for example, New College offered a lot more language tuition than other colleges did. And I had no idea about that when I applied. So if you want certain things in your academic life, then that's something to consider by talking to other students or looking on the student room or reaching out to other YouTubers as well, because it is something that there are lots of things that you might not be aware of when you apply, but can be really useful to know before.
Okay, what we're going to do is we'll do a quick round of what's your favorite thing about the college you go to? Should we start with Tolu? Putting you on the spot here.
No, it's cool. So basically I love everything about Keble, but one thing I would say is the architecture, because it's so unique. Like the red brick building is, you literally won't get anywhere else. So in that sense, Keble is so unique with that regard. So definitely the architecture and just the general view of the college.
So I'm just going to quickly talk about Univ. So for Univ, I think my absolute favorite thing is its location. I love the fact that we're so central. I kind of treat the Radcam and the Bod as if it's my own college library, like pop in and pop out for coffee and things like that. So yeah, I just love the fact that it's a cute sort of central college, and everything's very accessible for me.
So St. Peter's wise, I would say the atmosphere. It just feels very normal, very down to earth. Nobody is kind of stuck up or anything. I don't think that happens at any college, but that definitely wasn't the case at St. Peter's anyway. And there's also the bar on site, so there's the opportunities there for paid work, which I don't know about you, but I panicked about when I was applying, because we couldn't work alongside our degree, whereas at St. Peter's you can work in the bar, you can manage the bar, and that's all paid, as well as like they pay for open days and stuff. But yeah, the atmosphere mainly.
This is making me a bit emotional, can't lie, because I miss college so much. Yeah, same. I just love everything about LMH. I could go on for everyone knows that anyway. But as much as it kills me to say, because we didn't get this year, but LMH has got the most gorgeous grounds, and we're a little bit out of the centre, so we can't just pop in and out of the rag cam. It has to be a planned trip, but that doesn't bother me because I really like how much space there is at LMH. They're in the summer, the grounds are gorgeous, and we have our own section of the river we can go punting on. We can like rent the boats, and there's loads of places to just sit and reflect and be quiet, and there's just lots of space when you can go on an hour's walk within the grounds of the college. Like, it's massive, and I really love that. And there's like even deer, so we even have deer, which Magdalene always say that they just have, but we also have deer. We have like ducks and
I
animals.
didn't know that.
Yeah, we do. We have a couple of deer, and we also have like dogs and animals and stuff. So like it's very, yeah, just, and it's very good for like balls and events and stuff because we have lots of space. So
Tilly?
Yeah, so Jesus, what I really loved was that it was a smaller college. So I pretty much knew everybody in my year group within the first few weeks of term, which made a huge difference and just made it feel like a real community. And every time you walked through that kind of main Porter's Lodge, it felt like going home because you walk around the quad and literally know everybody that you passed, and also people in different year groups as well. And like you, Manny, Jesus was obviously in the centre, so I really valued the fact that I could just nip to the library, nip to the shops, everything was on my doorstep. Yeah, but I think being a small college, I particularly liked, and I actually applied to Magdalene, which was a really big college, but I was pleased that I ended up at smaller one because I think it suited me much better.
Viola?
I love the architecture of New College. I think it's so pretty, and it's fairly big, but it's central, but it's not like it doesn't get too many tourists. Are kind of tucked away, but we are still quite central. Yeah.
V?
I think I have to echo what you said. Like, I love LMH so much. Everything about it is pretty perfect. Like, it's hard to actually fault it. So I think for me, it's also the grounds and the gardens. Like, just being able to wake up and just like escape college within college. Like, it's really cool. You get to go walk around and stuff, and you're still at sight. And I like the fact that we are further out because I don't do well with like being in the hubbub of everything. I like to be able to go there and leave, and like as Manny knows, I'm not really like into going out too much and stuff. So I feel like if I was living in the centre, it'd be a lot harder for me to avoid going out. Whereas being so far out, it's like, oh guys, it's so far. But yeah, I just love everything to do with LMH. Absolutely everything. I can't even fault it.
I just want to note that we're all being very civil about each other's college choices right now, but the reality is there is such tough competition amongst colleges. From the moment you get here, you feel a sense of pride with your own college. And I know that I tease even V about LMH being far away all the time. And they will never take a word for it. So.
It's not even that far. It's literally like a 12-minute walk into town.
I love how it's a little bit out. Like literally, like we don't get tourists. No one like is looking at us or taking pictures or like, you know, no one really knows our college. It's just far. It's just, I love it.
Quiet and peaceful and lovely, and it's nice to be able to leave town at the end of the day.
Yeah, to be fair, when I spent time at LMH, it didn't feel like I was in Oxford anymore. Like, it felt like I'd gone on a little jolly out.
It's lovely, and we're right by the parks as well, so just lots of space. Come to LMH, guys.
Okay, so we've got a couple more admissions questions, and then we're going to move on to some of the more student life related questions. So one question that we have is, why did you not apply to Cambridge? Anyone want to start with that one?
I think I was dead set on Cambridge for a long time. Controversial, oh gosh. I don't know, I've never really questioned it. I was like, I'm going to go to Cambridge. I'd been to a couple of Cambridge open days, and I only ended up at Oxford like by complete chance. So I applied for Unique, which I literally was so sure I wasn't going to get on that I'd booked a holiday the same week. Like, I just hadn't even deeped it. I forgot that I'd applied. And then I got an email being like, hey, do you want to come and do a German summer school at Oxford? And I was like, well, I'm not going to Oxford, but like, sure, good CV, like personal statement experience. And so like, because I was doing that, me and my mom went to the Oxford open day, like just to go and have a look around, and we were both so set on Cambridge. And then at the end of the Oxford open day, we both got back in the car, and she was like, Eve, like, I know that you're really set on Cambridge, but like, Oxford's actually really lovely. And I was like, I know. And it just completely flipped it on my head. I think I just preferred that Oxford was a bit bigger and a bit more lively than Cambridge. Not that Cambridge isn't lively like completely, but it's just a bigger space. And also when I looked more into the course, when I was having my degree crisis about whether I was going to do English lit or languages, the Cambridge course has a lot more like linguistics, politics and stuff, which I am interested in, but the Oxford languages course is basically an English lit course with a bit of language taught on the side. And so yeah, and then when I went on Unique, that was it then. Like I was in hook, line and sinker, and I couldn't even. So I think it just, again, sad to say, but it depends on the vibe you get from the place. But obviously you guys might not be able to go and see. But again, I think at the end of the day, it probably has to be a course that dictates it the most as to what you think would be the best course structure for you.
Yeah, my reasons were pretty much almost identical to Eve's. For so long, I was very much set on going to Cambridge. And then I remember going on a Cambridge Open Day and in the masterclass, and I just didn't enjoy the vibe of Cambridge at all, because I come from London and I'm used to like noise and everything being busy. So I felt like Oxford was a better reflection of that and made me feel a lot closer to home in that regard. So I preferred Oxford. Because the medicine course at Cambridge and Oxford are practically identical. The only difference is in your third year with your research project, you can do something that's just not science related. But I felt like for me, I prefer to live somewhere, like, because my degree is 6 years long, I want to live in a place that I'd be happy and enjoy. So I felt like Oxford was the best bet for me. And plus the grade requirements for Oxford are actually slightly lower than Cambridge. So I felt like getting an A-star AA instead of 2 A-stars and an A was more achievable than, yes, I just didn't want to put myself under that much pressure.
Mood.
Yes, I thought like, let me just be real with myself and not try and push myself that hard, because let me not try and kill myself trying to get these grades. Let me just try A-star AA and see if I can do it. So that was what influenced me picking like Oxford over Cambridge in the end.
That was also definitely a consideration for me as well, because I remember the way that I had come on. So I always knew that I wanted to apply to Oxford, just because when I was younger, I saw one guy come on Dragon's Den and said he studied physics at Oxford, and everyone seemed super impressed. And suddenly I wanted to now do physics at Oxford. And that was the idea that I had in my head. But then when I came to one of the open days, I was speaking to someone in the admissions team, and they said that the way that Cambridge ran their computer science admissions was that they give out more offers, but the grade requirements are a little bit stricter. They also add a step requirement, so that means about 25 to 30% of the offer holders will not actually make their grades, and they're okay with that because that is kind of a filtration process. Whereas with Oxford, when they give you an offer, they kind of expect you to turn up in October. And that's why the grade requirements are a little bit lower. And for me, I just thought to myself that I'd rather get an offer that's actually attainable for me than get an offer and then miss it out because of something like a step requirement. So yeah, for me, it was a combination of a grade thing, and then also just because I thought Oxford was a much nicer city.
For me, I actually was going to apply to Cambridge for physical and natural sciences. I already had picked my college. It was going to be Gonville and Keys. And then the summer before I applied, so between year 12 and 13, I went on Unique and did classics kind of just for fun. And I also went to Cambridge and I did chemistry. And then I just, on that summer, I just realised I preferred classics. I thought if I was going to apply for classics, it would be Oxford. So that's why I chose Oxford. But I would have applied to Cambridge had I done science.
I'd never even considered Cambridge, so a little bit different there. I mean, I didn't even consider Oxford until after my GCSE results, because it just wasn't really a thing that we thought about. It wasn't a path that we took. By we, I mean like people from my school, people from my area. It hadn't been spoken about, like we just hadn't really been talked to about it as an option. So the only reason I even looked at Oxford was because it did the same course as Manchester, and I was set on going to Manchester because it was my home uni and I could live at home and it would cost less. But as Oxford was like the top option for the same course, I remember me and mum was just sat looking at the courses, and my mum laughed, I laughed. But then when I got my grades, I was like, do you know what am I going to lose? We had a look at the Cambridge website, and I'm not going to lie, just the website to me felt a bit much. I got vibes from the website that I didn't like. It just felt a bit more as you would expect Oxbridge to be, if that makes sense. Also, the grades were higher. So I was like, why would I do that to myself?
Anyone else want to add?
Mine was very similar. As Rosie, Cambridge was never an option, but mine was also a weird little story where I went on a day out shopping with my mum and dad when I was 10 years old in Oxford, and had no concept of the university. No one in my family had been to university, but we saw one of the big signs outside the Porter's Lodge, outside Balliol College, saying, I think at the time it was like 50p and you can come and have a look around. And we went in there and I was like, I'm going to go here, and everybody laughed at me. But I had this drive from that age then that I'd made up my mind that was the university I was going to. So Cambridge didn't get a look in.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last bit of the application process that we have questions about, and that's the personal statement. And we've had a lot of questions about what kind of supercurricular things, what kind of extracurricular things should I be putting on in a personal statement? I'm just going to begin by giving the difference between the two, just in case people don't know. So extracurriculars are the kind of things you do outside of your curriculum at school. That could be everything from model UN to playing football to literally absolutely anything. Like debating, etc. But supercurriculars are those kind of things, activities that you do outside of your curriculum that are related to your subject. So for example, one example would be, so if I'm doing computer science, something mathsy like a maths competition or an Olympiad or a maths project or research thing, or taking part in a science fair, those kind of things are supercurriculars because they are sort of lend themselves into your subject. Okay, so do we have any advice on how to sort of tackle that in terms of the personal statement?
I fully would say, like, at the end of the day, the extracurriculars really should not factor that much into. I remember going the first open day I ever went on, and this was at Cambridge, but the same applies for Oxford. This woman, she was quite blunt, to be honest. She was like, quite frankly, we don't really care if you were like a prefect of somewhere or whatever, or you're like head of your football team. Great, put it at the bottom and briefly link it to skills, but we can't lie. It's more about what you've read about your subject, because that's why we're bringing you into the university. So honestly, most of my application was supercurricular, but I would say that it sounds like really scary, that word, like, and I think a lot of people think that you need to have read like every book under the sun and that you need to have gone to every single talk and webinar and like open day and stuff. But the beauty of the supercurricular thing is that you can really delve into what interests you about the subject. You don't have to have done every single aspect of your subject. Mine was just some books that I picked up that I thought were kind of interesting, and I just sort of linked them to like a couple of talks that I'd been to. And Unique, I put quite a fair bit about like classes that I'd been on Unique, but everyone does it differently. So don't worry about your supercurriculars in terms of like what they are. It's more just like how many of them there are and how much passion you can show. Don't put on something that you found ridiculously boring, because you're not going to be able to talk about that in an interview. And yeah, they will talk about all of them in an interview, that they'll bring them up and ask you about them and stuff. So, but yeah, extracurriculars was literally like a little slither at the bottom of my personal statement, and that was it.
I would also say, oh, sorry.
Okay, no, Viola, you go.
Quick. I was just going to say that although Oxford don't really place as much emphasis on the extracurricular, other universities do. So just bear that in mind for your personal statement.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for medicine in particular, this is quite a vocational degree, so it's really important to indicate that you've actually done things behind the scenes to show your passion for the subject, because it's a degree that requires you to like potentially pursue a career path that's essentially lifelong. So within your personal statement, you can talk about your experiences, if you've got work experience or volunteering work, a major emphasis on mainly the academics as well, because in Oxford, the first 3 years are dedicated to like the sciences behind the human body, rather than you going out to practice particular medicinal skills. So because of that emphasis on the academics, it's really important that you highlight that you're interested in particular aspects of the human body through like reading, through watching lectures, and explaining what you've learned from that and reflecting on that too. I know for this year, it's quite difficult to attain work experience volunteering work because of Corona, but I've made a video on my channel explaining what you could do in the meantime, because even if you don't have work experience and voluntary work, you can still be doing lots of stuff in the background. Because I remember my tutors telling me that, in all honesty, they're not really entirely fussed about how much work experience that you get, because even if Corona wasn't an issue, they're aware that people have differences in terms of access to work experience and volunteering work, because some people may have doctors as parents, or they may know someone who's in the medicine work field, so they may have like extra access to particular things and some people just don't. So they don't really place too much of an emphasis on work experience / voluntary work, but they just rather see how you reflect on your experiences. So that's one thing that you can definitely do, because medicine's just a degree that requires proof to show that you actually are interested in wanting to like help people and maintain their health in all those instances as well. So that's just what I'd say to put for that.
I think it's important to highlight that you don't have to go out of your way, like, okay, medicine's a bit different, but for other subjects, you don't have to go out of your way to like okay, it's kind of difficult right now, but take a trip to go like see a volcano or go and like see things firsthand. You don't have to spend lots of money to do these things. And to be honest, tutors aren't going to be more impressed by someone who's, I don't know, taken a trip somewhere and done something firsthand, as opposed to you watching an online lecture and also taking something away from that. So it really is just do whatever you can at your scale. Even right now, whether that's something you might have seen on the StudyTube project, and you want to like go and do some reading after you've watched a video like that, or an online lecture or a class, it can literally be the smallest thing, just to show them that, look, you have gone that extra mile to say that I'm committed to studying this for 3, 4, 5, or even 6 years in the case of medicine. So it really is just trying to convey that passion to the admissions tutor and show them that this isn't just a whim. This isn't just me going, oh, I might as well just do a degree in English, or I might as well just do a degree in physics. So yeah, anyone else want to add to that?
I think back to what we were saying about interviews as well, it's kind of evidencing everything you're saying in your personal statement. So, you know, I've got a passion for English, like, why have you got a passion? Again, like justifying everything that you say. I also got told, someone at my school told me that like you had to make the opening really, bam, I'm here, I've arrived, which meant that my personal statement was so tragic. And when they read them out at our finalist dinner, we were all absolutely dying. The English students all seem to try and get very creative. You don't actually need to do that. Mine began with, on the 1st of February, I witnessed a cold-blooded murder. Which is just awful. I didn't. But yeah, I think like don't feel that you've got to try and do anything that's kind of too out there. It's more about what you've read, what you've done to show your passion for your subject is really important. So justifying and evidence, not wishy-washy statements about witnessing murders.
I think one more thing that hasn't been said, I was told to do this it was like an outreach event. They came to a local college from Oxford and talked about the personal statement. They were saying that academics wise, yes, obviously talk about why you want to do this subject at uni, but also talk about how your current subjects back up that subject, why you chose them, why they might have changed your interest, why even if they're not the same subject, they might actually help skills wise. So like I did art and textiles, and while that is not really related particularly in any way to an academic degree, I used it as a creative side of, I've done my research into artists, I've looked at the history of that, I've also explored creatively looking at objects and buildings and artists and artifacts, and related that to doing the same thing, looking at things in history. So if you've got a subject that you don't think relates exactly and you've just taken it because you enjoy it, and you know, fair enough, quite right, I did the same thing, that's okay. Just talk about why it was chosen and why it will help your degree in your personal statement. Doesn't have to be loads of words, but a couple sentences at least.
Yeah,
okay,
I would
so,
say don't. Oh, sorry. I would just
go
say,
ahead.
So yeah, don't worry too much. My personal statement, I wrote about chemistry, physics, Chinese, and French, as well as classics. So, and I still got in. So I don't think you need to worry too much about your personal statement, as long as you're writing about why you're interested in the particular course at the university, why you're interested in the subject, how, what other things you've done. But it doesn't need to be a huge amount, because I didn't write a huge amount about classics.
That's true. And go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, Manny, no, you quickly say what you wanted to say.
I was just going to say that's a really valid point, because Oxford has a lot of eccentric courses. So you might be applying for PPE here, but politics and economics everywhere else. And you might be like, oh, should I talk about philosophy or should I not? That's okay. Like if you don't talk about it, or if it's just like a line somewhere, the admissions tutors understand you're applying to 4 other universities that might have like different titles. So for example, I was applying to computer science and philosophy at Oxford, but straight computer science everywhere else. And I had maybe like a sentence about philosophy in there. And I was really worried whether that was enough or not. But the reality is that admissions tutors know that you don't want to put lots of philosophy in there for other universities that won't care about it. So it's okay if it's not an exact perfect match for the Oxford degree that you're applying to, just because there are 5 universities at the end of the day you're applying to.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that one thing to remember is that the personal statement's limited to 4,000 characters. So even if you have an abundance of things that you do want to talk about, in case there's not any room to do so, you still have your teacher's reference. So perhaps if there's something that you can't potentially include in your personal statement, ask your teacher or whoever's writing your reference to maybe slightly feature it in there, just so at least it's been acknowledged, because that's what I did, because I didn't want to put down my extracurriculars in my personal statement because I felt like I needed more room to put down my academics. So I'd asked my teachers from at school to potentially include like my achievements at school in there as well, and then unique as well, because I just didn't have enough room in my personal statement to explicitly say that I want on unique. So always potentially use that as a backup if there's no room in your personal statement.
Yeah, there's also a work experience section on UCAS, at least there was when I applied, and that's where I put all my summer schools that I couldn't fit into my personal statement. So that's also a little trick.
I think that there's also an important idea of being smart about your personal statement. If you mention, I read so-and-so book, be prepared to answer a follow-up question on that. And you can be smart in the sense that you can write things in your personal statement that are somewhat leading. That if you're in an interview and you say, I think that this so-and-so book was an interesting take on this because of this, you know that the first question is going to be, why do you think that this is the way that you interpret it? Is that the only interpretation? So when you write something, make sure that you've got those follow-up questions ready to be asked in an interview. Because if you kind of like trip up on the things that you mentioned in your personal statement, although it might not have a massive impact on the outcome of the interview, it doesn't reflect well on you. So whatever you put in your personal statement, make sure you can kind of back it up and talk about it. Doesn't necessarily mean go back and read every book you ever mentioned again, but make sure you understand the point that you were trying to make in that personal statement. And again, what Tilly was saying, question yourself of why and justify that.
I just wanted to say actually that was the only thing that I really found I could do to prepare for my interview. I gave my personal statement to someone that I knew, and I said, can you just ask me about everything on here? And obviously the questions that your tutors will ask will be, completely different to that, like probably, because they'll probably have like, I had a question in my personal statement, which is actually like quite a rogue gamble because you're not really supposed to do that. But of course they asked me that question in my interview. But like, if you're really struggling at how to prepare for an interview, being really confident about the contents in your personal statement is a really good way to go in there, knowing that you've done all that you can. For me personally, I had one interview that had absolutely nothing to do with my personal statement at all, and the other one was literally completely based on my personal statement. And obviously it's a complete gamble as to whether you will actually answer those questions, but I know that a lot of nerves for Oxford interviews come from feeling like you can't prepare for them. And I would really, really advise that the one thing that you do have in your control is your personal statement and how much you know about your personal statement. So just make sure when you go in that you have like a really firm grasp of it, that you've reread it a few times, because that's the one thing that you can have under your belt to give you that little bit of like confidence when you walk through the door. I would really, really, really recommend, like, because going in there, it feels like you've got no prep whatsoever and you feel so terrified because it is such an unknown thing. But the one thing you can do is go in and go, well, at least I know that I really did look over the things that I could control. So no matter how it goes, then you know that you've done what you can. So
yeah, I second that completely, because sometimes you don't realize that one particular sentence in your personal statement could definitely be brought up in an interview and analyzed. And I remember for one of my interviews, I like literally half of the interview was dedicated to literally ripping my personal statement apart. So I had to make sure that everything I put in there, I at least had something to potentially discuss further. So like it got to the point where I mentioned that I did one thing, for example, and a tutor would like completely say, oh, but why did you do that? What was the point? Could you have like gotten away with not doing that, for example? So it's definitely like important to note that they could potentially test you on things. And I think one thing that you can kind of use to sort of cheat the system, for example, is if you do want to reference a book or like a film, if you haven't read the entire book, maybe just say the specific chapter that you've read, because then they can't necessarily like try and tease you out of it with the other parts of the book if you've only explicitly said, oh, I've only read chapter 6 of this book and I've read this part. And then you can just like try and find a way to make sure that you won't be like analyzed or like interrogated to the core about something that you may not have potentially read properly or watched properly. So that's something that I would try and recommend to do.
Okay, so what we're going to do is going to move on to some of the more student life based questions. And the first question that we have is, how do you find the time to do other things with the intense workload? Who wants to begin with that one? V, should we start with you?
I think when it comes to balancing what you've got going on, it's for me, I work better when I have like less time to do things. I don't know why, but like if I know that there's a tight schedule and there's a lot to do, I know that every hour I have to like squeeze out of it what I can. So for me, actually worked really well having, you know, YouTube alongside running around in London plus my degree full time. Like it just made it a lot easier for me. Like when I have too much time, I procrastinate a lot worse. So for me, I think good scheduling and actually being realistic with your schedule is phenomenal and amazing, because it means you're setting realistic expectations. Because I think sometimes when you overestimate what you can do, you get so overwhelmed that you do nothing. But then when you don't schedule stuff in, you just procrastinate. So I think it's finding the balance. And for me, it just worked. I had a really good routine on balancing everything. I also didn't really have like much of a social life by choice. Like I didn't want one. So that kind of meant I had more time to do the stuff that I wanted to do on my own. So yeah, that's how I did it. I cut out, I wouldn't recommend cutting out social life if it doesn't work for you, but for me, like I get stressed out when I have too much on my social calendar. So for me, it was just a lot easier to snip that out and then focus on the things that I love doing, which is like YouTube and like access work and also my degree. So yeah, I think finding just scheduling in things and making sure you set realistic standards.
I was going to say there's actually a phenomenon called the Parkinson's law, which means that a task will fill the time that you give it. And once I realized that was like it for me. That was what just sorted my life out. Because honestly, I had some of the best essays that I've written. I'm not advocating leaving it till the last minute, but I'm saying that sometimes I would like clear a whole weekend to write this essay, which I would then spend procrastinating, only to write the essay on the Sunday anyway. And I always found that if I kept myself busy with all my other things, YouTube, like student newspaper and stuff, and I said, right, well, okay, I've got this meeting here and this meeting there, so I have to fit this essay in around that. And I found that I'm not advocating doing so much that you're just completely like, you know, like swept off your feet, but go out to the pub one evening. Go, like if somebody says to you, do you want to go to the pub? I'm sorry, but just go. It's obviously like if your deadline's in like 2 hours, don't go, but don't turn down things because you anticipate that you've got a lot to do, because chances are you'll spend the whole time thinking, well, why didn't I just go to the pub? Like make sure you have a balance between realizing that like you can fit in a lot more than you think, and that a task will take the time that you give. If you give yourself 4 days to write an essay, it will take you 4 days. If you give yourself 48 hours, it will take you 48 hours. If you give yourself an evening in the library, it will take the evening in the library. So just remember that like you can fit in a lot of things, and you know, procrastination gets minimized when you can't really afford to procrastinate.
Yeah, I think it's important to go ahead.
No, Manny, you go.
No, I was going to say, I think it's important to like acknowledge that all of us, while we were at Oxford, were involved in other things. Like none of us just sat there and did just our degree. And so I think it just does take a decent level of planning, because the terms are so short. You only have 8 weeks to do everything, and the next thing you know, you're off home again. That it's just making sure that when things pop up, as Eve said, you don't say no to them. You just kind of do them, because things will pass you by if you just keep focusing on the work. And you'll often find that taking an hour or two away, going to that talk, going to watch a debate, going out with your friends can often make you come back and feel more refreshed to do the work. You'll feel a bit more motivated. And there are just so many different things to kind of throw yourself into at Oxford, whether that's like something totally different like Quidditch, or whether that's like football or debating and things like that. It's so that there's always going to be something you can find to do, and I would recommend you do them. But yeah, Tolu, what were you gonna?
I was just gonna say that I think Oxford's really great because there's always something that you can do regardless of the time of the day. So I know for my timetable, the medics are constantly busy. Like we could have up to 10 lectures in a week, 2 practicals, tutorials left, right and center. But I feel like even with all of the things that we have to do on an academic sense, we could always sign up to clubs and societies from any time of the day. So I know a lot of sports teams, for example, they have really, really early morning wake up start. So if you wanted to like take up rowing or like football, for example, or something that happens in the morning, you can do and always make it in time for your 9 a.m. lecture. Or even if there's something at lunchtime, like a lunchtime run, there's always that to do. So I feel like, again, like Eve rightly said, so planning in advance and doing things accordingly is really, really helpful. And then also just knowing that there's also opportunity to do things outside of that time, because there's just always something that you could do regardless of the time of the day.
Real. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question, which is someone's asking, what is it like being BME at Oxford? Is it a difficult environment? So I can begin with that one. And V and I actually made a video about this like almost 2 years ago now. And I think that, yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that like being BME at Oxford does bring about certain obstacles, does bring about certain challenges, because it is, let's be honest, it's not the most diverse place out there. But I think that the important thing is to acknowledge that there are pretty good communities and support systems. So for example, in my first year, I ended up joining the Sikh Society, and it allowed me to meet so many people that were very similar to me, grew up with similar traditions, similar ideas, and we were able to like celebrate our festivals and stuff together. And the sort of main issue that I had, the main issues that I thought that I would sort of come across, the sort of explicit racism or things like that, just didn't seem to exist. I think the bigger issues that I had were more like implicit things, were more like the sort of structural racism that was a sort of part of maybe like the admissions process, or the sort of historical figures out and about and buildings, towns, etc. It's more those things that I felt that were affecting me. And those are the kind of things that we kind of see progress and change happening with over time, as we've seen recently as well with like oil and stuff. So I think that, yes, it's not an ideal situation by any measure, but I think that there are really good student societies and communities that can kind of help you out through that process. It definitely shouldn't be a deterrent in applying. It shouldn't be something that you should be like, okay, I'm not going to fit in, so there's no reason for me to apply. I don't think you should think about it in that way at all. But it is something to acknowledge. But then again, there also are those sort of amazing support systems there for you.
For me, I feel like as a Black girl, my experience has been like different in that sense. And I guess there's a wonderful thing about the term like BME, in that it like you have like solidarity in that sense, but it's also kind of like not the greatest term, because it then like puts everyone under one umbrella, but then kind of like silences some of the voices of other people. So I feel like as a Black girl, my experience might be different to Manny's experience, because, you know, we're two different people from two different races, right? So everyone's experience and walk is different. So for me as a Black girl at Oxford, I've had an amazing experience. And obviously my experience has been shaped by my race, because that's the skin I walk in, and whatever happens in my life, I experience it as a Black woman. And like I'm always at odds sometimes on my channel, because one part of me is like, I want to encourage everybody to apply, because obviously like Oxford has been great. It's going to open so many doors for me, and I've had a wonderful time in terms of friendships and what I've gotten involved with. Then sometimes on the other hand, I get conflicted, because sometimes I feel like the uni lets me down sometimes. And obviously, you know, you have words of them and you voice how you feel and stuff, but I don't want to lie to you guys, it will be difficult. Like, it's not going to be a walk in the park. Like, well, once again, I can only speak for myself and what I've experienced. It's not going to be a walk in the park. There will come moments when you feel really frustrated, and the people that you can turn to are like the student societies that are created. Like Manny said, there are lots of societies and things, but from the university as a whole, I sometimes feel disappointed by them. But overall, I'd say I've had like 95% an amazing time, and the 5% that hasn't been amazing has been hard. And I guess for change to happen, we have to go in there and like be present and like have our voices heard. But also it's difficult. Like it's a big strain on you. And at some points I was like, why couldn't I just come to uni and just be a student? Like I just didn't want to be fighting all the time. But I guess for change to happen, someone's got to do it, right? And I'm hoping that the work that people like me and Tolu are doing and other Black students at Oxford is going to make it every single year that much easier for every other year group, that they don't have to feel like they have to do the work that we've been doing. But yeah, there's a long way to go. So I'm not going to say it's perfect and that I've had an amazing happy donkey dory time, because I haven't. Like, it's been 90% amazing, 10% look, we just lost 5% in the space of this talk. But yeah, it's been definitely like a give and take situation. And yeah, sometimes the uni lets me down, but sometimes it's amazing. And I don't know, Tolu?
Yeah, not gonna lie, I agree with a lot of what V had just said. Oxford isn't the best,
Yeah,
but it's trying, and you can tell that they are trying to make things more inclusive for their students. Like Manny rightly said, there are so many societies that are available for people to be with who are of a similar background to them. So I spent a lot of my first year doing things with the Afro-Caribbean Society, because I felt like that was a safe space for me, because I was surrounded by people who also came from a similar background to me, and I really, really loved that. And I think in terms of that as well, we have students here who are so active and vocal about what their concerns are and what problems that they have, that they will immediately call out Oxford on its actions at the get-go. So the ACS, in terms of that, they're a very, very powerful society, and they're always constantly calling out Oxford for things that they're doing that aren't particularly like great for people of colour, but I think one thing with that is that Oxford is very receptive of these issues and they're willing to listen, and it's just a matter of ensuring that they're constantly being called out for the things that they're doing. I feel like for me, because I come from London, I've experienced the London bubble where everyone's really diverse and social and everything. And I think coming here has made me realize that my upbringing hasn't been the same as other people. So I've definitely encountered some people who I feel like have never spoken to a person of color before. And you can tell with how they speak to me and how they react around me. And I feel like I can't be entirely too upset about it because they've just not had the opportunity to interact with people of color before. So I feel like it's also kind of a learning game and a playing game just to see how you can potentially teach people to react better around people of color. But I know that Oxford's trying, and even on a college level, colleges are trying too. So I know at Keble, we have an equal opportunities officer who dedicates a lot of time to making events, even within our colleges, more inclusive and making sure that people's backgrounds are all appreciated. And I'm sure that other colleges have a similar sort of role. So I guess Oxford's trying, and I know it may seem like a bit isolating at times, but I feel like there are just enough people here to make you feel like you are a part of a really nice network and family, and you have the support that you need. So overall, my time at Oxford has been really, really great, but there's always just going to be those occurrences where it may not necessarily be fine and dandy.
And to add to what Tolly's saying, obviously I've now graduated and I was there for 4 years, and it's a long time, and from when I was there up until the point when Tolly joined and stuff, I can definitely say that I've seen change. Change has been happening. It's slow to happen, but it has been happening. Things have been heard and they are changing, and obviously roads just finally fell, and that within itself is something. It took a long time, it should have been sooner, but it's happened now, so I think definitely what Tolly's saying is correct. Retweet.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question that is asking for advice for incoming freshers. Who wants to kick that one off?
I would say I feel like we've all got lots of videos on our channels of freshers advice, but looking back now, I don't know if it's just the rose tinted glasses of me. I mean, first year was really difficult, and I'm first year will be really difficult in lots of ways. It'll be fantastic, but also really challenging, because that's just what the first year of university is like, because it's a learning curve. But I would say my number one tip for an incoming fresher would be to let go of any idea that you have that uni has got to be this perfect experience, like a coming of age film where you spend all this time just with your mates, and you grow as a person, and then it's just a beautiful montage of growth and love and development. And that I get, because you're paying £9,000, you want it to be this incredible experience. But the issue that you have is that when people graduate, people tend to look back at things with, as I said, rose tinted glasses. And so everyone who looks back on their uni days as the best time of their life, it probably will be one of the best times of your life, but it'll also have a lot of challenges. And I think that in first year, when I was struggling, I was gripping onto this idea that it had to be really good all the time, and that when it wasn't good, I was somehow wasting my money or failing to live up to that experience. And then I just wound myself up more. So I would say if I could go back and do first year again, I would embrace the chaos and embrace the highs and the lows, and because there will be lows, there'll be very low lows. Oxford's a very intense environment, and it can get really overwhelming at times. But there will also be really, really high highs, and it will be a complete roller coaster. Second year's a bit more chill, I can't lie, well, apart from coronavirus. But I would just say just let go of any idea that it needs to be picture perfect all the time, and embrace the sort of roller coaster that it is. And don't ever think that you're wasting your money or not living up to what it should be because you're not having a good day or you want to go home for a bit. Just embrace everything, and that will mean that you're not holding yourself to such a high standard throughout first year, which I did. And I felt that kind of it didn't ruin first year, but when you get to second year and you kind of embrace all the chaos a bit more, it's so much easier. So yeah.
I think also realising when you're starting as a fresher at Oxford that starting any university is really scary, but starting at this one that you keep hearing about as one of the top in the world is absolutely terrifying. And I think everyone here would agree that we were all really, really nervous before freshers and during freshers. But I definitely had this perception that everybody else during freshers was finding it absolutely great and they weren't worried about anything. and they were going to smash their course and they were going to manage all the nights out and nobody else was having a problem. And it's quite a classic thing during Freshers Week. I think everybody goes around saying everything's great and everything's perfect. And the reality is, behind closed doors, I mean, I was on the phone to my mum, bawling my eyes out, saying, I don't deserve to be here. Come and get me right now. They've made a mistake. This is a disaster. And as the term progressed, and I made friends and made really close friends, and people started to open up, you realize that everybody was going through that at the beginning, and we still were further down the line, but nobody spoke about it. And that's because everybody is trying to be this person that it's all going okay for and putting out this perception. So don't necessarily believe what everybody says. If you're crying behind closed doors, the likelihood is your friends probably also are. And it's so well known at Oxford, this feeling that it is referred to as imposter syndrome, and everybody here knows what that means. And it's totally normal to feel that way, but you have been selected for a reason. You do deserve your place. And yeah, try to tell yourself that in the run up, and also particularly during your first term.
Yeah, I can vouch and say I definitely had that as well. And my piece of advice would be kind of along similar lines, and that I spent a solid 2 terms just nodding my head in tutorials, saying I understood what was going on, just because I felt like I didn't want the tutors to know that I wasn't following or didn't know what was going on. And then it hit me after my first set of collections when I didn't do well, that I was the only one losing out from this. And the whole point of the tutorial system and having this sort of close teaching experience is the fact that you can convey that to your tutors, and they can help and tailor work for you if you're not understanding things. And it was only when I opened up to my tutor and said, oh, actually, I don't think I'm understanding things as well as I might have led you to believe, that things started to get better, because he'd organized extra tutorials, he'd sort it out. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, that the sort of growth that I've seen in myself over the last 4 years, is the fact that I just kind of stopped caring about how other people were doing. And the moment I started focusing on myself academically, I started doing better than I thought I could possibly do. So it's so easy to get caught up in this, everyone's super smart, everyone's smarter than me, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm an admissions error, I somehow ended up, I accidentally got in, I accidentally did well in this. But the reality is you deserve to be there. And just focus on your work, you're doing well, your mental health, your relationship with your tutor, so they know where they can help you, and you will do so much better. Anyone else want to go next? Okay, we can move on to the next question. And I think this is one of our last, I think this is the last question actually. Yeah, we're just running out of time. But our last question is, should I not apply because I fear rejection?
No, apply. Oh my gosh, it's one out of your 5 choices. It's one. If you don't get in, you'll go somewhere else and you'll have a great time. But imagine just going somewhere else and just always thinking what would have happened? Would I have got in? It's rejection's rough. It's horrible, and it faces you with the worst aspects of yourself and the worst emotions that a human can feel. But in the words of Ibs Mo, rejection is redirection, and I am such a firm believer of that. If you don't end up at Oxford, you don't, but you'll never sit there wondering what if I'd have applied? Do you think I would have got in? And also there are so many people at Oxford, myself included, that applied and had fully got their headset on another university. I was like, Edinburgh, let's go, let's have some fun, get the bagpipes out, I'm ready to go. And then I got in, and imagine if I was so convinced I wasn't going to get in, and every single stage I went through convinced me further that I wasn't going to get in, and I did. And imagine if I had been scared, my entire life trajectory would have changed. And yeah, as I said, it's 1 out of 5 choices, or I think even do you know what I mean? That's one. There's so, I don't know. Yes, apply. Just apply.
That's literally the most emphatic answer
ever. The only way for you to just not ever get a place at Oxford is if you don't apply. So even if you're conscious of the idea of rejection, the only way you can know if you could potentially get a place is if you do apply. So please do so. My journey is very much similar to Eve's in the sense that I was very much interested in St Andrews because I was very skeptical about Oxford and not whether or not I'd be able to fit in here or if they'd want me there. But if I hadn't applied, then I wouldn't have gotten in. So please do just apply. And if for some reason it doesn't necessarily go in your favor, then there's so much more for you in life. And Oxford isn't necessarily the only end goal. There are so many other routes that you can go through, and you just please apply, because you never know where it could lead up to.
I think the important thing is that none of us, I hope I'm saying that correctly, none of us applied thinking we were going to get in. And so if you're thinking you're not going to get in, that's the start of a successful application. So like, don't worry too much about that. Okay, I think I'm going to end off, sorry, with the very, very last question is, what is your one favorite thing about Oxford? What's the one thing for you that you've loved about being at Oxford? Or yeah.
Can I go? I always say this, and I think people might think like it's a boring answer to things, but I really genuinely mean it from the bottom of my heart. And I think for me, I kind of lost faith in the education system for a very long time because I just didn't feel heard or seen. And especially at my school, like honestly, I wish someone had been at my school, honestly. And as you all know my story, like my teacher literally was like, no, you're not doing this, you're not applying. And I didn't apply, as you all know. And then I ended up doing the foundation year the following year after. So technically I'd missed like the deadline to apply to Oxford. And yeah, I ended up doing the foundation year, which I had to push myself and be like, V, you need to prove these teachers wrong because you can do this. And for me, when I arrived at Oxford, my favorite thing has been just how much they hear you. Like the one-to-one tutorials, to this day I'm still shooken in awe of them, because it's so cool that I write this essay and you actually read it and mark it. And only do you mark it, like you're going to sit there for an hour and grill me about it, which I guess for some students like, oh, that's so boring. But to me, I'm like, you actually are hearing me, you're challenging my opinions, you're like going back and forth with me, and you're the leading expert in the world on this. Your book is literally in the reading list because you are that guy or that woman. And for me to be sitting here with you and you need to hear me, I don't know, it just restored my academic confidence. I feel like I have more faith in myself, my ability. Like now I'm not afraid to stand in a room full of, I don't know, CEOs, for example, and speak my mind, because I feel like those tutorials have really given me the skill that no one can ever take it away from me. So for me, like aside from everything else that comes with Oxford and all the amazing opportunities, just the very teaching of it for me was something that I don't know, like it makes me feel so happy when I think about it. Like it was the best. And yeah, I really, really appreciated that.
Who wants to go next? Anyone?
I'll go next. I'm going to be really, really cringy, and I'm just going to say the people, because I feel like Oxford, yeah, I know. But I feel like for Oxford especially, I feel like I've definitely found my people in a way, because I'm now surrounded by people who are just as interested in academia and the willingness to study. And I feel like a lot of the times growing up, I would feel very much alienated in the sense that I was always constantly working and I was always really like interested in academics. And now being surrounded by people who have those similar thoughts is just really, really reassuring. And I know with the medicine course in particular, like I found people who just genuinely share so many of the same interests as me. I like see myself within my friends, and it's just a really nice environment to be in, knowing that I'm surrounded by people who are just like me and who appreciate me for me, and I appreciate them for them, because we have so many similarities. And I just feel like it's just really nice being surrounded by people who do share similar values to me and will support me because of my like ways and everything, which is really, really reassuring.
No, that's a really good point. Is there anyone who wants to get it?
I think, yeah, again, like a bit of a cliche again, but it is just the most incredible city and university. It's got this magic about it that does just give it this truly unique experience. And the way that you're taught, the buildings that you're going into, the libraries you're going into, you'll hold on to that for life. Like it is something that will never leave you. And as V said, like I found exactly the same since graduating, that the system that you were taught at Oxford meant that you learn to think independently, you learn to express yourself, articulate yourself, and they are such fundamental skills that you'll take onto the next stage of your life. And also, as Toulouse said, the friendships that you make there, like my uni friends, I still see all the time. We all, like everyone, I've been with a big group of 20 from Jesus, go on holiday together every year. Like they are lifelong friends, and it is a lifelong experience. And I think it's something that I still found, I'm guessing you guys probably still found, that whenever I walked into the corner in Jesus, even today, it's still a kind of pinch yourself moment. Like, how on earth did I get here? How on earth did I call this ridiculous place home? And yeah, that will stay with you forever.
Who wants to go next?
I can go. I feel like it's really hard to like add to anything that you guys have just said, because I think it is just like, it's just a uni experience. And I think I just think Oxford is just such a magical place. And I think for me, the best thing has just got to be, I know we've touched on this a lot, but there's just always something to do. Like whether you want to join a society, if you want to go out clubbing, if you want to go to the pub, if you want to go shopping, if you want to go do sports, Oxford's got it all. Like, it's just that perfect size of city where it now has enough shops where if you need anything, it's there. We even have a Greggs now. Like, this is important. But it's also it's got a lovely feel to it. It's not massive, it's not overwhelming. And I think that what I love about Oxford is that, granted, you're quite busy with work and stuff, but if you want to go to the cinema, you can go to cinema. If you want to go out for a meal, you can go out for a meal. If you want to spend some time in bed, you can. And I've just felt like I've never been at a loose end of anything to do when I've been at Oxford. And there's always talks and societies and balls and cool events and parties and everything. And there are also funds that colleges have to help people out. That's another thing that I really like, is that Oxford's very rich. And although they don't always spend their money in places they should, which is a problem, and we need to combat that, a lot of colleges do have massive pockets of money to help people with things. If you want to do a travel project, for example, they've also got hardship funds, bursaries. So that's something that I feel like Oxford has that not a lot of unis do have, is that each college has got like the most niche pockets of money to help you out with things. So yeah.
Real.
Yeah, I couldn't really add much to that, but yeah, my favorite thing about Oxford is just the entire experience, the amount of opportunities there are, being academically challenged, the people, and yeah, as Eve says, the money, because it's definitely really useful being able to be funded to go abroad. I think the fact that like my college let me go to Rome and they paid for it, which I think is incredible. I wouldn't necessarily have been able to do that at another university with it being fully paid for as well. So yeah, there's just so much to do and so many opportunities. But yeah, it's my favorite thing.
Rosie. I can't. Can you guys hear Rosie? Can't hear you. Sign language. You're going to type it in the chat. Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to end off on I think mine's very similar to V's, in that I think just the idea of the kind of conversations you have at Oxford, the kind of training you have in just being able to convey your opinion and also be introspective on why you have that opinion. Because I think when I was at school, I was definitely that kid who had an opinion and wasn't always receptive to other people's if they kind of countered mine. But I think one thing that I've really learned in the last 4 years is how to take that sort of constructive approach, how to sort of understand another point of view, and more importantly, either go away and understand someone else's opinion, but okay, actually you're right, or go back and be even stronger in my opinion because I understand why I hold that, or I understand the crux of why I might think a certain way. So I think having those kind of conversations, having that constant dialogue with someone you know who is more experienced and smarter than you in that field, really does train you to kind of take that into any sort of career and use that well. Brill. Well, thank you guys so much for coming onto this Q&A. I think it's been really helpful, and thank you all for watching at home. It's been really nice kind of interacting with you guys and hearing some of your questions. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And if you do have other questions, do pop them in the comments down below. This video will be saved on my channel for you to watch later, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. Otherwise, you can find all of these lovely people on their social channels, which I'll put in the description of this video after. And if I can't edit it, then I'll comment it down below. But yeah, just want to thank you guys for coming today and sharing your wisdom. But we'll see you guys.
Thank you for organising.
Thank you for sorting all of it out.
No worries at all.
Woohoo.
Okay, I'm gonna end